Hey guys, tonight we're ditching memory foam and Wi-Fi for the crusty charm of Victorian street gangs, where your mattress is a potato sack, your best friend is named Rat Jimmy, and your Wi-Fi password is "Stop stealing my boots." It's Charles Dickens meets chaos, with 30% more pickpocketing and 100% more children named Soot. So before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Switch on a fan for that white noise and get as comfortable as possible. Let's set the mood. Have you ever wondered what street gang life was really like in Victorian England? Did these pint-sized criminals get dental? Did they actually use slang like blimey, or did they just grunt at each other while eating potatoes? Did anyone ever wash their hands? Or was hygiene just a suggestion? Could you make it through a night on the cobbles with nothing but a ragged scarf, suspicious bread, and a questionable friend named Knuckles? What did you do if you were the short one in the gang? Was there an HR department for resolving disputes about who gets the last mouldy turnip? Well, congratulations, you've just woken up in 1851. The air is thick with coal smoke, you're 11 years old, and you're pretty sure your new shoes are actually just two mismatched left boots. Welcome to the gang. Try not to get arrested before breakfast. Morning starts in a place best described as open-concept poverty. You roll out of your sleeping spot, a literal coffin-sized box you share with 3 others, stretching sore limbs and wondering if anyone's invented a mattress yet. Spoiler, they haven't. Your first conscious thought is that your elbow is numb and your knee has fallen asleep in solidarity. Welcome to the Victorian lodging house, where privacy is a myth and personal space is measured in centimeters. If you're lucky, your bed is an actual wooden box, the same size and shape as the ones used at the local undertaker, minus the dignity and the handles. If you're unlucky, you're on the floor, sandwiched between a coal scuttle and a boy who talks in his sleep about ham sandwiches. He's never actually seen a ham sandwich, but dreaming is free. The coffin beds, yes, real thing, are lined up like dominoes, each one rented by the night for a few pence, and stacked with the efficiency of a particularly morbid game of Tetris. There's no bedding unless you count last week's newspaper and a scarf that used to be white. It's the Victorian answer to the modern capsule hotel. Only instead of mood lighting and free Wi-Fi, you get the gentle company of foot odor and the occasional rat with boundary issues. Above you, the ceiling leaks cold London fog. Below you, the floor is so uneven, it's more of a suggestion than a surface. Every sound in the house is communal: snoring, coughing, the telltale squeak of someone else's borrowed boots creeping out before dawn to get first crack at the market crowd. If you're a light sleeper, tough luck. You either adapt or you end up in the premium suite, which just means the corner farthest from the outhouse. You're not alone, not ever. To your left, a kid named Smudge mutters about finding a farthing in his sleep. To your right, an older girl named Peg is wrapped around a cat that may or may not be hers. You've become experts at the art of not rolling over. Once, you made the mistake of stretching and accidentally elbowed old Tom in the face. He didn't complain, he just muttered something about character building and rolled over, blanket and all. There's no alarm clock. Instead, the house wakes up to the sound of someone down the hall hacking up a lung, or the unmistakable clatter of a baker's cart going by outside. If you want a little more sleep, you stuff the ends of your scarf in your ears and hope for the best. It never works. Sunlight, when it finally shows up, doesn't pour in gracefully. It sort of seeps in, diffused by coal smoke, and lands on your face with all the enthusiasm of a tax collector. If it's winter, your breath fogs in the air, mixing with everyone else's, until it feels like you're all marinating in communal lung soup. Getting up is a group activity. There's nowhere to stand that isn't already someone's foot. So everyone shuffles, grumbles, and negotiates space like diplomats at a very cold, very cranky summit. Clothing is pulled on in layers, each one scratchier and colder than the last. Boots are inspected for new holes. Laces are knotted with the sort of creative energy usually reserved for escape artists. If you think things get more dignified from here, don't hold your breath. The queue for the wash basin is already 10 deep, and someone's used the last of the good water. Breakfast will be whatever's left from last night, scraped out of a tin and eaten with a spoon that's definitely not yours. But for now, as you blink into the grey, coal-dusted morning, you take a moment to be quietly grateful. You're awake, you're still in possession of both boots, and you've survived another night in the coffin beds. Not everyone can say the same. So, would you last a week? Would you last a night? Or would you find yourself dreaming of memory foam and realizing, with the clarity only Victorian poverty can give you, that sometimes the real luxury is simply waking up at all? There's no interview, no paperwork, just a hungry look from an older kid and suddenly you're part of the crew. Membership requirements: own at least one shoe, possess a vague sense of direction, and be willing to distract the police by pretending to faint on command. That's it. No letters of reference, no HR orientation, no inspirational PowerPoint about the gang's core values. It's just another Wednesday in the rookery. And your career as a criminal prodigy has begun entirely because you happened to be standing near a loaf of bread at the wrong time. Or maybe it was the right time, depending on how you feel about personal hygiene and a future in freelance law evasion. It always starts the same way. You're minding your business, possibly counting the holes in your only sock, when a wiry older kid with a nose for desperation and a hat that's seen better centuries sizes you up. He nods at his mate, who gives you an appraising look, the way a butcher eyes a suspicious sausage. Then comes the test. Oi! Can you run? Before you know it, you're following a trail of sooty footprints behind the raggedest bunch of children London has ever produced. Training is immediate, informal, and, if you're lucky, mostly verbal. First lesson, blend in. Second lesson, don't get caught. Third lesson, if you do get caught, develop amnesia about everyone you've ever met. The gang leader, often an enterprising 15-year-old with more scars than birthdays, demonstrates how to disappear into a crowd by vanishing mid-sentence. It's not magic, it's survival. New recruits are usually given the glamorous job of Dipper's monkey, the one who gets lifted through windows, shoved under carts, or sent to create a scene just as someone else's fingers find their way into an unsuspecting pocket. The fainting routine is a classic. Bonus points if you can look convincingly pale, which, given the Victorian diet, is practically guaranteed. Don't expect a uniform. Gang fashion is strictly BYO, bring your own, your kit, a cap that doubles as a pillow, a scarf with more holes than fabric, and boots that technically qualify as shoes because you still have them on both feet. If you have both shoes and both laces, you're management material. Initiation isn't ceremonial. It's logistical. Sometimes it's a quick dash through the market with a stolen apple. Sometimes a full hour hiding behind rain barrels while the peelers, the local police, shout about feral children and who's responsible for this cabbage disaster. You learn fast that keeping quiet is a survival strategy, and that the best lies are told with absolute conviction and a mouth full of crumbs. There's an unspoken hierarchy. The littlest, scrappiest kids get sent into tight spaces, chimney flues, under market stalls, through half-open cellar doors. If you're clever, you might get promoted to lookout, standing on tiptoe and pretending to count pigeons while watching for trouble. Those who survive a week without major incident are given the highest honor, a nickname. Usually it's something flattering like Soot, Ferret, or the one who didn't cry when Mrs. Grigsby threw her soup. Don't bother asking about benefits. There's no dental, no paid time off. Just the occasional shared crust of bread and the promise that if you ever go missing, someone might notice. Eventually, probably, unless it's raining. Your only real asset is loyalty. Stick with the crew and they might stick with you. Betray them, and you'll find yourself alone, facing the world's coldest city armed only with half a turnip and a questionable grasp of the rules. But for all the grime, chaos, and questionable nutrition, gang life offers something else. Belonging. You're no longer invisible. You've got a group. Loud, dirty, and completely unreliable, who'll laugh at your jokes, watch your back, and occasionally let you take the first bite of stolen bread. In Victorian London, that's as good as family gets. So, congratulations, you're in. Welcome to the gang. Try not to faint in the mud this time. Victorian gang couture means whatever you can find. Mismatched boots, ragged caps, and a scarf that doubles as a handkerchief, weapon, and napkin. If you look like you've been rolling in soot, congratulations, you fit right in. Getting dressed in the morning is less a question of style and more of basic arithmetic. What pieces of clothing do you have, and which ones are currently dry enough to count as wearable? Your wardrobe is a carefully curated collection of whatever hasn't been stolen, traded, or dissolved in last night's rainstorm. Buttonless coats are highly prized, partly for warmth, partly for their many convenient hiding spots, and mostly because they make you look 2 years older and exactly 73% more intimidating to children under 5. Start with the boots, if you have them. They might not match, and they almost certainly aren't yours originally. A left from one market stall, a right from a distracted delivery boy. Laces made from an old bit of string and blind optimism. Some kids get by with scraps of burlap tied around their feet, the true minimalist look. Wet socks? Standard. No socks? Even trendier, and easier to rinse in a puddle on the rare occasion you're feeling fancy. Trousers are usually patched, if not by you, then by 3 generations of desperate hands. Patches over patches, sometimes holding more air than fabric, always baggy in the knees and suspiciously tight elsewhere. If you're lucky enough to have pockets, guard them with your life. If you're unlucky, the holes in your pockets are how you keep track of your most important belongings by losing them at regular intervals. Shirts come in 2 flavors. Once white and already grey. Both are equally itchy. Most are inherited, usually after their previous owners grew out of them, or decided that sleeves were a luxury item. If you ever find a shirt with all its buttons, it's considered a sign of impending good luck, or possibly a setup by the police. Layering is the real secret to Victorian street fashion. You pile on whatever you can find, shirts over shirts, jackets over vests, sometimes all at once. If you're shivering, add a scarf. If you're still cold, add yesterday's shirt as a makeshift cape. Bonus points if your layers allow you to carry a week's worth of breadcrumbs, a pocket knife, 3 marbles, and a pebble you swear is worth at least a farthing. The cap is your crown. Every gang member needs one, even if it looks like it's spent most of its life in a coal bin. It keeps the rain out of your eyes and your hair out of your porridge, and it's a convenient way to signal your allegiance, slanted just so, or with a patch of color stolen from a rival crew's scarf. Lose your cap, and you might as well tattoo "New Kid" on your forehead. Of course, no ensemble is complete without the scarf. It's the ultimate multi-tool. Today, a napkin. Tomorrow, a sling for your arm. And by Friday, an essential disguise for running from the peelers. Sometimes you see a scarf so filthy it's achieved structural integrity, standing up on its own in the corner of the room. You keep telling yourself you'll wash it. But then again, you also told yourself you'd stop stealing biscuits from Mrs. Doolan's window. Holes, stains, and mismatched colors aren't just tolerated, they're expected. The dirtier your outfit, the more you blend in. There's a certain security in looking indistinguishable from every other urchin on the block. You want to look like you belong. And belonging, in this case, means looking like you lost a fight with a chimney and then hugged a puddle for comfort. Forget Paris. Forget Savile Row. The real fashion icons are those who can make a potato sack look like a 3-piece suit and walk down the street with the confidence of someone who's never had clean underwear but isn't bothered by it one bit. If you manage to keep your boots on, your scarf wrapped, and your cap out of the mud, you're officially dressed for Victorian street success. So go ahead, strut down the rookery. After all, nobody in history ever looked cooler while being this cold. Your hands are small, your conscience is even smaller, and your best asset is the ability to look innocent while relieving a distracted gentleman of his watch. Every successful pickpocketing is followed by a group huddle and a shared stale biscuit. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. In Victorian London, pickpocketing isn't just a crime, it's practically a sport. And you're in training from the moment you first realize you can fit your whole arm up to the elbow in someone else's overcoat. Forget school. This is your education now. Your teachers are the older kids, experts in both nimble fingers and plausible deniability. They've mastered the gentle art of who, me, and the not-so-gentle art of running very fast in the opposite direction. It starts with observation. You and the gang gather in the shadow of a market stall, pretending to inspect bruised apples while your real job is to spot opportunity. You're looking for marks, distracted shoppers with bulging pockets, gentlemen adjusting their hats, ladies weighed down by purses, and anyone who looks like they haven't noticed their coin purse is swinging wildly from a single frayed thread. Bonus points if they're arguing about the price of turnips. Distraction is your best friend. Timing is everything. There's a sweet spot between I just tripped and I'm about to get walloped with an umbrella. You learn to move in time with the crowd, to let the flow of humanity sweep you right up to your target. Your fingers are quick and your movements rehearsed. But your face is your true secret weapon. Nobody suspects the wide-eyed, innocent-looking child with the runny nose and the tragic lack of shoes. You look up at them, eyes big as dinner plates. And for just a second, they let their guard down. That's when you strike. Technique matters. The classics are classics for a reason. There's the bump and dip, where one gang member bumps into the mark, while another deftly lifts the goods. There's the market distraction, involving a well-timed squabble, a thrown turnip, and at least 3 kids all shouting about who started it. For the truly advanced, there's the stall, where you simply stand very close to someone and look like you're just as confused by the chaos as everyone else. Meanwhile, your hand is exploring pockets like a squirrel hunting for nuts. Sometimes you hit the jackpot, a heavy purse, a shiny watch, or a string of pearls. More often, it's just a handful of buttons, a bit of lint, or a half-eaten boiled sweet. You quickly learn not to look disappointed. Even a single farthing is better than nothing, and anything edible is a win, no matter how questionable its origin. Getting caught is always a possibility. The peelers are everywhere, lurking at the edge of crowds, just waiting for an excuse to grab a scrawny arm and ask pointed questions. If you're fast, you're gone before they even notice. If you're not, well, you practice the art of the innocent shrug and try to look as lost as possible. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you end up spending the afternoon hiding in a barrel with 2 rats and a stolen roll. After every job, the gang regroups in a secret spot, usually behind the bakery, where the smells almost drown out the damp. The loot is emptied onto a dirty handkerchief, and there's a brief, noisy debate over who gets what. The spoils are never much, but sharing a stale biscuit while recounting the day's close calls is as close to celebration as it gets. Pickpocketing isn't just about stealing, it's about survival, about keeping your wits sharp and your stomach, if not full, at least less empty than it would have been. It's a risky game, one played every day by children who know the difference between luck and skill, and who understand that in Victorian London, sometimes the only way to make it through the day is to take what you can and run. And that's the art of the pickpocket. Part theatre, part athletic event, and always, always a gamble. So next time you find your pocket mysteriously lighter, spare a thought for the tiny professional who made it happen, and hope they spend your missing coin on something better than another stale biscuit. It's 7 a.m. and the gang gathers in an alley for breakfast. On the menu, cold porridge, stolen apples, or, on rare days, a sausage found under mysterious circumstances. Bon appétit, or whatever the Victorian version of that was. The day starts with a ritual as old as time and nearly as depressing: the sorting of breakfast. In Victorian London, the most important meal of the day is more about survival than satisfaction. You don't wake up to the smell of fresh bread or sizzling bacon. You wake up to the smell of damp bricks and the reassuring presence of at least one rat, who is either a neighbor or a rival for your food. No one's really sure. The alley serves as the dining room, the kitchen, and sometimes the wrestling arena if two people reach for the same chunk of porridge. Everyone gathers around whatever is on offer. There's always someone on lookout duty, because nothing ruins a meal like a copper wandering by and asking where you got that apple and why it has Mrs. Bickley's initials carved into it. The gang's seating arrangement is strictly first come, first damp. If you find a relatively dry box or a step with only minimal pigeon residue, you guard it with your life and your elbows. Breakfast itself is a team effort, cobbled together from whatever could be snatched, begged, or bartered since sundown. Cold porridge is the staple, if you can call it that. Sometimes it comes from a kind neighbor, sometimes from the leavings at a workhouse, and sometimes from a mysterious tin left out on someone's back step. You never ask too many questions about the origins, because curiosity is a luxury. You're just grateful if it's not moving. The porridge is best described as textured. It's thick enough to use as mortar and bland enough to make you question the very concept of taste. If you're lucky, someone's pilfered a sprinkle of sugar or a crust of bread to crumble on top. On feast days, someone might have snuck an apple from a market stall. The entire apple is sliced into enough pieces to feed everyone, meaning each person gets approximately 3 molecules of fruit. But no one complains. Not out loud, anyway. Then there's the sausage. Oh, the sausage. Every so often a miracle occurs. A sausage appears, nobody's sure where from, and nobody's asking. You could grill it, but who has fire? Instead, you pass it around like a sacred relic, each person taking a reverent bite and passing it on, careful not to look too eager. There's a mutual understanding. The less said about the sausage, the better. The less you think about where it came from, the more likely you are to keep it down. Breakfast is not just about eating, though. It's about catching up, sharing information, and swapping stories. Who saw a new shopkeeper on Bow Street? Who heard about the baker's dog, the one that bites left-handed pickpockets? And who's got a plan for lunch, assuming the world doesn't end before noon? You learn quickly that food is a form of currency. One day, you're the hero for scoring a bruised pear. The next, you're scraping the bottom of the porridge pot and hoping your luck turns. Utensils are optional, and manners are discouraged. Most meals are eaten with fingers, or, if you're feeling posh, a wooden spoon that's seen more mouths than a town crier. Cleanliness is relative. A quick wipe on your sleeve, and it's good as new. Sharing is the rule, but so is vigilance. Take your eyes off your bowl, and someone else's spoon might find its way in. Breakfast in a Victorian gang isn't a peaceful, leisurely affair. It's quick, efficient, a little chaotic, and always slightly competitive. You eat fast, laugh if you can, and get ready for the day's work, whether that's picking pockets, dodging peelers, or dreaming up new ways to outsmart breakfast itself. So, as you finish the last spoonful and lick your fingers, you remind yourself, in this world, even a cold lump of porridge is a victory. Bon appétit, indeed. Now, who's up for seconds? Just kidding, there never are. Bathing is for the wealthy, and soap is basically a myth. Your daily routine includes wiping your face with a sleeve, shaking the fleas out of your hat, and pretending not to notice that everyone smells like old potatoes. Cleanliness is a moving target in Victorian London, and most of the time you're missing it by several miles. The idea of feeling fresh is reserved for aristocrats, their poodles, and possibly hallucinations. For a street gang kid, a bath means standing outside in a downpour, arms outstretched, mouth open, hoping the rain manages to get past the grime and sadness. If it's summer, you might get a bonus round of washing when you accidentally fall into the canal. Congratulations! You're now 80% mud and 20% existential regret. Let's talk soap. You've heard rumors of it, sure. Some say it's made from mysterious animal parts and costs more than a week's worth of bread. Others say it's just a story adults tell to scare children into behaving. Wash behind your ears, or the soap will get you. In reality, if you ever do come across a bar of soap, it's immediately confiscated by the oldest member of the gang and used as emergency currency, or possibly chewed on out of curiosity. Hair care is simple. You don't do it. If you're lucky, your hat hides most of the evidence. Once a month, usually when the itching becomes a competitive sport, someone attempts a haircut using the same knife reserved for slicing bread and opening letters. The results are creative. Bald patches are trendy, and if you end up with a hairstyle that's vaguely symmetrical, you're considered posh. Lice are unavoidable. There's even a competition to see who can catch the biggest one. Bonus points if you can get it to do tricks before setting it loose in someone else's hat. Teeth cleaning? That's optimistic. Most kids chew on sticks or rub their gums with a crust of bread. More out of boredom than hope. Toothpaste is for fantasy novels and the Queen. Missing teeth are just a sign that you're surviving. Every gap is a badge of honor, proof you've lived through another winter of questionable sausages and even more questionable water. Clothes are only washed when they start to protest. Even then, it's a delicate operation. Find a puddle, dunk the shirt, wring it out, and hope the smell is at least reduced to a tolerable level. Underwear, if you have it, is rotated according to the lunar cycle or when it achieves independent movement. On a special occasion, a holiday perhaps, or a really ambitious lice outbreak, someone might boil water and declare a group wash day. The excitement lasts until you realize there's only one scrap of soap and no towel. You end up standing around in the cold, shivering and complaining, which, oddly enough, is still preferable to being actually clean. Scent is social camouflage. Everyone stinks, so no one stands out. The aroma is an evolving blend of sweat, coal smoke, wet dog, and that peculiar sharpness of Victorian street stew. Occasionally, someone tries to mask the odor by dousing themselves in cheap perfumes stolen from a market stall. It never works. Instead, you end up smelling like a floury potato, which is somehow even worse. It's not all bad. There's a sense of unity in shared squalor. No one's judging your grease stains, and you're certainly not judging theirs. The rich folk across town might have silver brushes and lavender water, but you have resilience and a thick enough layer of dirt to stop most biting insects. So you get used to it. You scratch, you sniff, you carry on. If you see a bathhouse, you avert your eyes, just in case someone tries to drag you inside. And when you finally settle in for the night, you take comfort in knowing that, while your pillow might be a brick and your blanket a sack, at least no one can accuse you of being too clean for the gang. In Victorian London, that's about as fresh as it gets. You quickly pick up the lingo. Nobbled means caught, skipper is the boss. And divvy is what you call someone who can't tell a copper from a chimney sweep. All communication is done in whispers, winks, and subtle nudges. Learning the language of the streets is your first real test as a new recruit. Victorian London is a world of double meanings and invisible conversations. In the rookery, nobody trusts anyone who talks too fancy, or, even worse, too loud. If you want to blend in, you'd better master the art of saying a lot without actually saying anything that can get you nobbled by the peelers. Words here are weapons, camouflage, and the best way to make sure you're not the one carrying the blame when something goes missing. Everything has a code, The bread you stole becomes the morning's earnings. A police officer is a peeler, a bobby, or, if you're feeling particularly poetic, the old blue. The market is the drop. And a successful heist is a touch. To be on the cross means you're up to something, usually illegal. And to grass is to snitch. No one likes a grass. And everyone's always on the lookout for one when the word goes round that the beaks, the magistrates, are on patrol. It's time to scarper, run for your life, and look innocent while doing it. But it's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it. You never announce your plans. Instead, you drop hints and hope your mates can keep up. The old man's got new cobbles, you mutter, which means the local shopkeeper is wearing new shoes and thus might have a bit of money on him today. Keep your lamps peeled is a reminder to watch for trouble. The language is part misdirection, part survival strategy, and all necessity. Secret signals are just as important as secret slang. You learn them as fast as possible, partly because missing one can mean the difference between a clean getaway and an awkward explanation to a very stern policeman. There's the tap of a finger on the nose, danger, a quick tug on the left ear, run, or a subtle scratch of the chin, target in sight. Sometimes it's as simple as dropping your cap, which means scatter. Sometimes it's as complicated as a whole series of gestures you practice behind the bakery until you're sure nobody else is watching. The youngest gang members are trained first as watchers. Their job is to stand at the street corner and casually fiddle with a bit of string. If a copper comes into view, the string goes into the pocket. A silent alert. Sometimes you use runners, kids who bolt down the street if they spot trouble, hoping to draw the attention of the peelers while the real work happens in their wake. Even the most innocent conversation can be loaded with hidden meaning. Nice weather for ducks might actually mean meet me behind the fishmonger in 5 minutes and bring the loot. Everyone develops their own style. Some kids are masters of the wink. One twitch of an eyelid, and the whole crew knows to melt into the crowd. Others are all about subtlety, muttering code words under their breath as they pass. And some, mostly the new recruits, are hopelessly obvious, nodding and winking so much they look like they're being attacked by invisible wasps. These are your divvies, and it's everyone's job to make sure they don't accidentally get the whole gang caught. Of course, rival gangs have their own languages, and it's a constant contest to invent new codes faster than anyone else can figure them out. Sometimes the only way to know if someone is friend or foe is by the way they say evening. Too cheerful? Probably a grass. Too quick? Definitely up to something. In the end, it's not just what you steal that keeps you alive, it's what you know and how well you keep it hidden. In the world of Victorian street gangs, talk isn't just cheap. It's the difference between sleeping under a roof or behind bars. So you master the slang, perfect the signals, and hope that tonight, at least, your words are just slippery enough to keep you out of trouble and in the good graces of the skipper. Assignments are handed out based on seniority, size, and the ability to run fast when things go sideways. If you're small and scrappy, you're a pickpocket. Tall and loud, you're the distraction. Everyone else just tries to look busy. Mornings in the gang begin with a council of elbows and muddy boots, crowded into the only patch of dry ground the rookery has to offer. The skipper, that is, the oldest, bossiest, and usually most well-fed among you, calls the shots. He's got a squint like he's sizing up a side of beef. But really he's just deciding who's likely to mess up the least today. There's a brief but passionate debate about who did or didn't lose a bread crust in last night's card game. And then it's time for business. Pickpockets, or dippers, are the stars of the show. The smaller you are, the better. Small hands slip into pockets and purses like ghosts, and if you get caught, you can slip away even faster, sometimes right under a carriage or through a gap in the market crowd. You learn to move in sync with your partner. A carefully choreographed dance that, if done right, ends with a new coin, and, if done wrong, ends with you legging it down the street with a butcher's apprentice in hot pursuit. Dippers are quick, clever, and always hungry. You get the best stories and, if you're lucky, the first pick of whatever food or trinkets are won that day. Next are the lookouts, the watchers, the eyes on every corner. This job is for the nervous types. Those who can stand perfectly still for ages, looking casual while really surveying every possible threat. Your mission: spot the peelers before they spot you, catch a whiff of trouble before it arrives, and signal the others with a cough, a dropped handkerchief, or, in an emergency, by flat-out running away. Lookouts don't get much glory, but they get respect. Everyone remembers the day a lookout failed, and half the gang spent the night hiding in a coal cellar. Lesson learned: never daydream on lookout duty. Then come the distraction artists. The tall, the loud, the blessedly unsubtle. Your job is performance art. Start an argument, fake a stumble, burst into spontaneous tears, or sell the world's most questionable sausages at the market stall. The more chaos you create, the easier it is for the dippers to do their work unnoticed. Some have a talent for drama that borders on Shakespearean. A good distraction can be as simple as shouting, "He's nicked my bread," or as complicated as a full-blown pie fight staged in the middle of the market square. Creativity is key, and the reward is getting to watch the mark's face as their wallet vanishes while everyone else is busy watching you. And then there's everyone else, the in-betweeners, the floaters, the ones not quite fast enough for dip-in or loud enough for distraction. You carry messages, run errands, keep an eye on rival gangs, and, if all else fails, stand around looking innocent. Sometimes this means sweeping a street you don't own or loudly admiring the quality of a policeman's boots, just to keep suspicions away from the rest of the crew. If you're clever, you'll angle for promotion by inventing a new distraction or perfecting a way to vanish behind a laundry line. Assignments rotate, but one rule stays the same. The job you're given is the job you're stuck with until you either outgrow it or outrun your mistakes. The more successful you are, the more likely you are to be trusted with the really risky jobs, lifting a watch from a well-dressed gentleman, filching a loaf from a baker who's wise to every trick, or playing postman with a message that could get the whole gang in trouble if intercepted. By noon, you know whether today is a lucky one, or if it's going to be spent dodging angry market vendors and ducking down alleys. But no matter your role, the goal's always the same. Don't get caught, don't go hungry, and maybe, just maybe, end the day with both shoes still on your feet. The local peelers, police, are always lurking. Your main defense? The ability to vanish into a crowd or, failing that, to hide under a cabbage cart and hope they're allergic to vegetables. Life on the streets is a never-ending game of cat and mouse, and you are, very much, the mouse. Except in this version, the cat is wearing a blue coat, has an impressive collection of moustaches, and is surprisingly good at sniffing out trouble. Unless, of course, you're quick on your feet, and even quicker with a story. The police, known to everyone as peelers, after Sir Robert Peel, their founder, might fancy themselves as the upholders of justice, but to you and your fellow gang members, they're just another hazard, like open sewers, hungry dogs, and Mrs. Magg's terrifying pork pies. The trick is to know the territory. Every alley, market stall, and shortcut through the rookery is memorized by heart. There's the shortcut behind the fishmongers, the one where the stones are always slippery, but it gets you 2 streets over before a peeler can even finish shouting, "Oi, you!" Then there's the old coal chute that spits you out near the docks, perfect for making a quick getaway, even if you emerge smelling like you spent the night in a fireplace. If you're clever, you always have 3 escape routes in mind before you even start your day. If you're not clever, you're probably already in the back of a police wagon, explaining why you're carrying 3 turnips and a watch with someone else's initials on it. Blending in is an art form. The best street kids know how to look like part of the scenery. One moment you're a threat, the next you're just another hungry face in a crowd. When a peeler appears, everyone switches from plotting mischief to a sudden, intense interest in completely innocent activities. Sweeping, whistling, or helping an old lady cross the street. Ideally, one who won't later accuse you of pinching her purse. If you're really good, you can make yourself invisible just by standing perfectly still and looking bored. For extra safety, try the classic lean against a wall and act like you've always lived there. It rarely works, but it's a tradition. Of course, sometimes you get spotted. Maybe someone snitched, maybe you got greedy, or maybe you were just too slow. When a peeler starts after you, all bets are off. The chase is on, and suddenly you're sprinting through crowds, dodging handcarts, leaping over puddles, and squeezing through gaps that were clearly not designed for humans. You keep your ears peeled for the shout, "Stop, thief!" which, ironically, just makes everyone else on the street stop and stare while you make your grand escape. If you're lucky, you lose them in the chaos. If you're unlucky, you wind up underneath a cabbage cart, praying that the peeler has a sensitive nose and a strong dislike of vegetables. Sometimes you get creative. One kid once escaped by disguising himself as a street performer, juggling potatoes for a handful of coins, while the peeler searched for a boy in a red cap. Another hid in plain sight by offering to help the police find the real thief. The peelers were never amused. But the danger isn't just in being caught. The peelers have a knack for showing up at the worst possible moment, right as you're about to nab the day's best haul or in the middle of a perfectly orchestrated distraction. You learn to spot them from a distance, the shine of a badge, the unmistakable stride, the way the crowd seems to shift ever so slightly in their wake. Your reputation depends on your ability to avoid them. The best street kids aren't the ones who steal the most. They're the ones who get caught the least. There's a certain pride in going months without so much as a stern look from the law. And if, on the off chance, you do get caught, you have a collection of innocent faces and wild stories ready to go. Me? Officer? I was just helping carry these turnips. For church. Honest. So, you keep your eyes open and your wits about you, always ready to run, to blend, to vanish at a moment's notice. Because in Victorian London, the real skill isn't stealing, it's getting away with it. And that means keeping one step ahead of the peelers every single day. At noon, you and the crew plan your biggest score of the day. A loaf of bread from a distracted baker. The heist involves 3 decoys, a staged coughing fit, and one truly heroic pigeon. By the time the church bells start their midday chorus, you and the gang are already lurking around the corner from Mrs. Priddle's bakery. It's the one with the always broken window, the best crusts in the rookery, and, unfortunately, a baker with eyes in the back of her flour-dusted head. The stakes? High. The loaf? Questionable. But it's still the closest thing you'll get to a hot meal this week. The plan is ambitious. The team assembles behind a market cart, whispering like spies plotting to steal the Queen's jewels. Everyone has a job. First, the decoys. 3 scrappy kids, each with a talent for being as annoying as possible. Their job? Cause maximum chaos. The first walks in with his hair sticking up like he lost a fight with a mop, asking for yesterday's rolls and declaring them too crusty, miss, at full volume. The second circles the shop, examining every single bun with a look of such deep suspicion, it's a wonder he doesn't get arrested for loaf loitering. Meanwhile, you're lurking by the window, counting down in your head. Timing is everything. The third decoy, your best performer, stands at the door and suddenly erupts into a coughing fit that could win awards for both volume and phlegmatic authenticity. "It's just the dust, miss. Just the dust," he gasps, attracting the attention and mild horror of everyone within 10 yards. In Victorian London, nothing clears a crowd faster than the possibility of catching something with more syllables than hope. And then, the pièce de résistance. The pigeon. No one is quite sure where the gang's animal accomplice came from, but it has a knack for dramatic entrances. At the appointed moment, someone flings open a sack, and out bursts the pigeon, wings flapping, feathers flying, the very picture of avian chaos. It makes a beeline for the display of loaves, skidding across flour and scattering crumbs. Mrs. Priddle shrieks, the decoys shriek, and in the confusion, you slip behind the counter. Every move is calculated. You reach for the best-looking loaf, which, here, means least green. Tuck it under your coat and slide out the side door just as the pigeon makes its triumphant exit, trailing what might generously be called airborne bread garnish. The whole operation takes less than 30 seconds, but it feels like an eternity. Your heart is pounding, your hands are shaking, and you're pretty sure you still have a dusting of flour in your eyebrows. The gang regroups in an alley 2 streets away, far enough that you're unlikely to be chased by anyone who values their lunch break over vigilante justice. There's a brief, reverent silence as you unveil the prize. A lumpy, slightly dented loaf. Still warm, or possibly just radiating the collective body heat of the crew. Someone makes a joke about the great bread caper, and everyone laughs, mostly out of relief. Sharing the spoils is another operation in itself. The loaf is torn, not sliced. Etiquette is left at the bakery. You divide it as fairly as you can, though there's always some dispute about who deserves the crust and who has to settle for the end with the mysterious blue spot. No one complains. In the world of Victorian gangs, bread is bread, and victory, even a small starchy one, tastes better than anything. As crumbs are dusted off and bellies are filled, at least fractionally, the day feels a little less harsh. You've pulled off a heist worthy of legend, or at least worthy of a very animated retelling tomorrow at breakfast. And all thanks to teamwork, quick feet, and a pigeon who, as it turns out, just really hates bakers. Midday in the rookery, where hunger, hustle, and a little bit of luck come together in the greatest bread heist the street has ever seen. Territory disputes happen over important things, like which gang gets to sleep under the driest bridge. Negotiations involve a lot of posturing and, occasionally, a slap fight that lasts until someone's hat falls off. It's midday, and you and your crew are eyeing up your usual patch under the old stone bridge, the one spot in the rookery that doesn't leak when it rains, and occasionally still smells faintly of horse rather than something less identifiable. Unfortunately, the dry bridge is prime real estate, and you're not the only ones who want it. Looming in the shadows, arms folded and faces set to unimpressed, is the rival gang, the Mudlarks. Their skipper, Big Elsie, is legendary for 2 things: her ability to whistle louder than a train, and the way she can glare you into reconsidering your life choices. Confrontations start with a standoff. The 2 gangs line up opposite each other, chins raised, feet planted, each kid doing their best impression of someone who's definitely not cold, hungry, or scared. There's a tradition to these meetings, a ritualized exchange of insults that, if you listen closely, mostly revolves around the comparative hygiene of each crew. Oi, skipper, your lot smell like turnips. At least we don't eat 'em off the floor. High wit, low stakes, and always plenty of witnesses. Negotiation is less about actual talking and more about body language. Hands on hips mean you're serious. Crossed arms mean you're not budging. The secret weapon? A well-timed yawn, signaling that you find the whole encounter boring and aren't in the least bit intimidated, which, to be clear, is always a lie. The bravest among you swap hats. A peace offering that often turns into a hat-snatching contest. If someone's hat lands in the canal, that counts as an automatic loss, and you're banished to the second-best bridge for the night. But sometimes, words give way to action. The slap fight is a time-honored tradition, a flurry of arms, palms, and indignant shrieks, carefully designed to create maximum chaos with minimum injuries. No one wants a proper fight. The point is not to get hurt, just to prove you're not scared to get messy. You win if you end up with both your shoes and your dignity. You lose if you get knocked into the mud or, worst of all, if your hat falls off in front of everyone. There's no faster way to become the subject of rookery gossip than having your hat trampled in a territorial dispute. Occasionally, someone calls for a truce, a short-lived peace, often sealed with a shared crust of bread, or a half-frozen turnip. Rivalries are fierce but fluid. Today's enemy might be tomorrow's ally, especially if the peelers are in town or a new bakery opens up. There's an unspoken rule. When the grown-ups get involved, everyone's on the same side. Nothing unites street gangs faster than the appearance of a police badge or the heavy tread of a market inspector. Once territory has been established, usually after much bickering and a few exchanged threats, everyone melts back into the daily routine, keeping a wary eye on the competition. The bridge is won, the boundaries redrawn, but the tension never fully disappears. You might share the same streets, but alliances shift like London fog, and you're always prepared to defend your patch, your bread, or, in desperate times, your hat. And so, life in the Victorian rookery continues. A careful dance between rivalry and camaraderie, competition and reluctant cooperation. Dealing with rival gangs isn't just about slaps and shouting, it's about learning who to trust, when to bluff, and how to survive in a world where the rules are always up for negotiation and the driest bridge is worth its weight in gold. Home is the rookery, a neighborhood so crowded even the rats have to queue. You learn to sleep lightly and keep your pockets empty, because even your friends might borrow your dinner. A rookery isn't just a place. It's a living, breathing organism made of alleys, mud, rickety staircases, and people, so many people, stacked on top of each other like old books in a second-hand shop. Every building leans a little, every window rattles in the wind, and every surface, no matter how high, seems to be sticky with some ancient, unspeakable residue. There are so many families crammed into a single tenement that it's impossible to keep track of who's actually related and who just drifted in last week and stayed for the pie. The air is a symphony of smells: smoke from cheap coal, fried onions from the pie shop, the sharp tang of chamber pots emptied into the gutter at dawn, and a constant undertone of damp socks and hope. On hot days, it's like living in a stew. On cold days, it's more like a meat locker. Except the only meat is whatever's hanging in the butcher's window and whatever you're trying to keep in your stomach. No matter the season, the rookery never quite dries out. Water drips down from rooftops, seeps in under doors, and sometimes seems to rise right up through the floor just to keep you humble. Privacy is a concept you've heard about, but never really experienced. There's no such thing as your own room. Just a patch of floor that you stake out with your elbows and protect with the ferocity of a terrier. You fall asleep to the lullabies of snoring neighbors, babies wailing, and the occasional thud as someone turns over and rolls off their pile of rags. If you're lucky, your spot isn't directly under a leaky window or above the communal privy. If you're very lucky, you've managed to train your nose to ignore everything except the smell of bread in the morning. Locking doors isn't really an option. For one thing, nobody can afford locks. For another, it's bad form in a place where your next meal might depend on the goodwill, or at least the distraction, of your neighbors. Instead, you keep valuables on your person. And valuables here means anything from a stub of pencil to a half-eaten potato. Shoes are a hot commodity, and if you don't sleep with yours under your head, you can expect to wake up barefoot and resentful. The rookery is noisy, all day and well into the night. There's always something going on. Arguments over stolen bread, impromptu games of kick, the can, secret deals whispered in dark corners. Some nights, a brawl spills out into the street and rattles the shutters. Other nights, it's just the slow, rhythmic clatter of washing being pounded on the stones. On rare occasions, a street fiddler will set up shop outside your building, playing tunes so lively that for a moment you can almost forget the hunger. But for all its chaos and crowding, the rookery is also a place of constant surprise. Lost pets are returned with great ceremony, usually missing a few whiskers but with new names. Babies are looked after by the entire neighborhood. If a mother needs to nip out, there's always an extra hand or a watchful eye. Even the meanest-looking tough will pause to help a child who's fallen, though they'll grumble about it afterwards. Above all, you adapt. You learn to move quietly, sleep with one eye open, and trust people just enough to get by, but not so much that you miss breakfast. You become fluent in the rookery's ever-changing rules, and if you're lucky, you learn how to find moments of laughter and friendship in the middle of the muddle. Because, at the end of the day, the rookery isn't just where you live, it's where you survive. And sometimes, on the rarest mornings, it even feels a little bit like home. The street market is chaos incarnate. Everyone's selling something, sometimes themselves, sometimes a pile of mysterious meat that may or may not be a cat. Your job, blend in, grab what you can, don't get trampled. Navigating the Victorian street market is a test of agility, cunning, and occasionally your sense of smell. The market is the beating, grumbling heart of the rookery, a living maze of stalls, wagons, shouting vendors, and enough produce on the ground to feed a small nation of rats. Crowds press in from all sides, each person intent on their own mission, whether it's finding a bargain, unloading questionable goods, or just avoiding eye contact with Mrs. Fishwick, who's been trying to sell the same 3 turnips since Easter. The air is thick with noise. Someone's calling out the price of fresh eels. Interpret that word as generously as possible. Children weave through legs with baskets full of yesterday's bruised apples, and a butcher yells about a 2-for-1 special while side-eyeing a dog that's been loitering by his stall since dawn. Bargaining is loud and physical, elbows are weapons, coins are scarce, and the only universal language is a raised voice and a sharp glare. For the gang, the market is both opportunity and obstacle course. Blending in is crucial. You keep your head down, your hands loose, and your wits even sharper. The goal is simple: grab what you can without drawing the wrong sort of attention. Sometimes this means pinching a roll while the baker argues with a customer. Other times, it's just about finding a dropped onion and claiming it as your own. You learn to spot the distracted, the ones whose eyes are bigger than their purses, or who set down a basket for just a moment too long. Speed is everything. If you hesitate, you lose. You dart between stalls, dodging flying cabbages and the occasional indignant goose, timing your movements to the flow of the crowd. The market is the one place where everyone is too busy to pay attention, unless you make a mistake. Drop a fish, bump a vendor, or shout too loudly, and suddenly every eye in the place is on you. The market has its own justice system, and it's quick. A grabby shopkeeper, a shouted accusation, and if you're not fast enough, a friendly chat with the local peeler. Of course, not all market jobs are about theft. Sometimes the crew is sent on errands, fetching a message, scouting out a new stall, or just keeping an eye out for rival gangs. Information is as valuable as bread, and the market is where news travels fast, especially if you're willing to trade a secret for a slice of pie or a few bruised pears. Food is only part of the prize. The market is full of treasures if you know where to look. A broken pocket watch, a bent spoon, a length of ribbon. Every so often, you stumble on a real find, a dropped coin, an abandoned hat, or, on very lucky days, a baker distracted long enough for you to nab an entire loaf. Each discovery is greeted with a whoop of delight and immediately pocketed or shared, depending on the mood of the crew and how many witnesses there were. The dangers are real, but so are the moments of unexpected kindness. A vendor who turns a blind eye, an old woman who slips you an apple for your mum, a fellow urchin who signals a warning just before a copper rounds the corner. The market is ruthless, but it's also where you learn to survive, not just on cunning, but on the invisible web of favors, debts, and alliances spun between its stalls. By midday, you're sweaty, hungry, and slightly bruised, but richer in food, trinkets, or at least stories. You escape the chaos with the rest of the gang, clutching your haul and weaving back through the alleys with the practiced swagger of someone who's just bested the market at its own game, at least for today. The market shuffle is never really over. It's the daily dance of risk, reward, and rapid retreat. And as you head home with your spoils, you know you'll be back tomorrow, ready to blend in, grab what you can, and, hopefully, not get trampled. There's honor among thieves, but it's mostly about not ratting each other out unless the reward is really, really good. Betrayal is rare, but only because everyone is equally untrustworthy. The first rule you learn in the gang isn't written down anywhere. It's whispered, hinted at, and passed along over cold porridge and stolen apples. You don't snitch. Not to the peelers, not to rival gangs, and especially not to the adults who hang around the rookery with ears like hawks and the morals of a wet sock. The entire operation depends on everyone keeping their mouths shut. Don't grass, the older kids warn, or you'll wake up with your boots missing and your breakfast vanished. Loyalty is a complicated thing in a street gang. You're all in it together, for warmth, for food, for survival, but you're also all hungry, desperate, and 2 days away from bolting if a better deal comes along. The kind of trust you build is born of necessity, not romance. You share your crust of bread because you know you'll want someone to share with you tomorrow. You defend each other from rival gangs, but you also know exactly who would trade you for a pie if the price was right. There are levels of trust. Your closest mates, the ones you've slept beside in the rookery, run from the peelers with, maybe even shared your last halfpenny with, those are your real crew. You'd risk a slap on the head for them. You might even take the blame for a botched bread heist if you know they'll cover for you next time. But the wider circle, the kids who drift in and out of the gang, those you keep at arm's length, friendly but not foolish. Punishments for betrayal are swift and almost comically creative. Get caught stealing from the crew's communal stash, and you might wake up with your head shaved or your shirt replaced with something even itchier. Rat someone out to the police, and you'll find yourself friendless, foodless, and on the receiving end of every bad joke for a month. The worst fate is exile. No more spot under the driest bridge. No one to warn you when the peelers are coming. No one to split a sausage with. In a world where the only safety net is the people around you, that's about as bad as it gets. Morals are flexible. If you find a purse, you split it with whoever's closest. If someone's hungry, you look the other way while they nab an extra potato. The only real line in the sand is drawn around the group. Outsiders are fair game. The rich, the careless, and the unlucky are considered legitimate targets, almost an act of charity, if you listen to some of the gang's more philosophical members. "We're just evening things up," the skipper says, as he tucks away a pilfered coin. Redistribution, but inside the gang, there are rules. Don't steal from each other. Don't lie about what you've lifted. Don't leave a mate behind, unless leaving them behind is the only way everyone else can get away. There's a logic to it, a kind of street justice that isn't written in any law book, but is enforced more strictly than anything the magistrate could dream up. Forgiveness is possible, but not guaranteed. A good apology involves returning whatever you pinched and swearing on something important. Your mother's name, your last decent boot, or, in desperate cases, your spot in the warmest corner of the rookery. Second chances exist, but third chances are the stuff of fairy tales. Alliances are always shifting. Today's enemy could be tomorrow's best friend, especially if a new bakery opens or the peelers crack down on a rival crew. But within the gang, unity is survival. You bicker, you barter, you bluff, but when push comes to shove, you stick together. So you live by the code. Or at least, you try your best. Because in a world where trust is scarce and fortunes change by the hour, loyalty, even the questionable, occasionally slippery kind, might be the only thing you can truly count on. When food runs out, you forage, bins behind bakeries, the occasional rat, or that weird green stuff growing on the side of the canal. No one asks too many questions. Hunger isn't a passing inconvenience in the rookery. It's a way of life. The background music to every day. It sharpens your senses, quickens your step, and drives your creativity to places you wish it wouldn't go. You wake up thinking about breakfast, spend the morning planning for lunch, and drift off to sleep dreaming of dinner. Sometimes, those dreams are all you get. The art of urban foraging isn't glamorous, but it is essential. You know every alley, every bin, every loose plank behind every shop that's worth a peek. The bakery's refuse heap is prime real estate. But you have to be fast. The bakers toss out yesterday's bread crusts just after dawn. And by the time you arrive, the competition, rats, birds, rival gangs, has already formed a queue. If you're lucky, you'll find a heel of bread with just enough softness left to be chewable. If not, it becomes a missile in the afternoon's inevitable food fight. Vegetables are harder to come by. Sometimes, you find a bruised potato or a limp carrot thrown away by a vendor with higher standards than sense. Other days you rely on the green stuff that grows in mysterious tufts along the canal wall. Is it edible? Maybe. Is it better than nothing? Depends how hungry you are and how desperate you're feeling. Either way, you always try to take the bits that don't have visible bite marks from creatures larger than yourself. Then there are the more adventurous options. Rats, for example, are surprisingly common fare if you can catch them and if you know someone with a fire and a strong stomach. No one admits to eating them, but everyone knows someone who has. Pigeons are a step up. If you can manage the chase and avoid the wrath of their city-wide fan club. The youngest kids sometimes catch eels from the muddy banks, dragging them home in triumph, eyes wide with pride and the faint hope that no one else will want a bite. You quickly learn that hunger blurs the lines between food and not food. Anything that won't make you immediately sick is fair game. Once, the gang scored a haul of nearly fresh apples from a barrel left outside the greengrocer's. They tasted like freedom and a little bit of mold. Another time, someone found a sack of flour, only to discover it was mostly inhabited by weevils. No one cared. You sift out the biggest bugs and cook the rest. Extra protein, they say. If you're feeling optimistic, scavenging isn't just about finding food, it's about beating the odds. The streets are full of hungry mouths, and you need to be clever, quick, and sometimes just plain lucky to eat your fill. A friendly shopkeeper might slip you a crust or a bruised apple. A sympathetic housemaid could leave leftovers wrapped in newspaper by the back door. And on very rare occasions, a successful pickpocketing means you have coins to buy something fresh, an almost indescribable luxury. There's no shame in scavenging. Everyone does it. The only crime is wasting food, and the only thing worse than hunger is watching someone else eat while you're left with nothing but crumbs. On the days when all you find is disappointment and empty bins, the crew bands together, sharing whatever scraps they have, inventing elaborate stories about the feast they'll have tomorrow. And if all else fails, there's always tomorrow's search, a new day, a new opportunity to root, rummage, and maybe, just maybe, find enough to keep you going until the next sunrise. Hunger, after all, is a master you can't ignore. But for all its hardships, it also makes every meal, every morsel, taste just a little bit like victory. Fun is whatever you can invent. Rat races, dice games with weighted bones, or story hour where everyone tries to outdo each other with tales of near misses and spectacular escapes. In the rookery, there's no such thing as a day off or pocket money for the music hall. So you make your own fun, with whatever scraps of time, trash, and imagination you can muster. The gang's entertainment menu is both creative and suspiciously sticky, much like everything else in the rookery. Rat racing is a classic. It starts when someone traps a particularly lively rat in a bucket. No shortage of contestants here. Bets are placed in buttons, crusts, or the promise of a future favor. Each rat is named for luck. There's always a scurrier, a lightning, and inevitably, one named Sir Chewsalot. The track is a chalked circle on the ground, and the crowd gathers in close, cheering, jeering, and occasionally interfering if the race gets dull. If you're lucky, your rat makes it to the finish before anyone else's, or before someone's cat decides to join in. On rainy days, when the alleys are rivers and all hope of finding dry bread is lost, dice come out. Not the fancy kind, but homemade, bits of bone, old wood, anything you can scrape into a cube. The bones are never quite even, and everyone suspects the older kids have a knack for carving lucky sides. Gambling is part of life, a game of chance that mirrors the real stakes of street living. Sometimes you win a whole apple or a warm spot by the fire, and sometimes you end up losing the shirt off your back, literally, if you're playing with the really high rollers. Then there's storytelling, the one entertainment everyone can afford. Each night, after the day's hustle and scrapes, the gang piles together in whatever shelter they can find. Story hour begins. Tales of epic bakery heists, near mythical street chases, and the legendary time someone managed to swipe a whole roast chicken from under a vicar's nose. The best storytellers embellish shamelessly. One bread roll becomes a mountain of muffins. A narrow escape turns into a chase across half of London. The point isn't the truth, but the drama. If you get a laugh, a gasp, or, best of all, a new nickname out of the deal, you've won. Music, when you can find it, is a treat. Someone's always got a battered harmonica, or maybe a tin whistle with only 3 working notes. It doesn't matter. The tunes are catchy, the lyrics improvised, and the beat is kept with whatever can be tapped, clapped, or banged against the nearest wall. Sometimes, a passing fiddler will join in for a few coins, or just a cup of warm soup, turning a damp alley into a raucous concert hall, even if only for a song. And then there are the street games: kick, the can, leapfrog, or the ever-popular dodge the goose, which is exactly as terrifying as it sounds. Sometimes, the older kids invent complicated games with elaborate rules no one else can remember. Sometimes, fun is just seeing who can slide the furthest through the mud after a downpour. The winner gets the honor of first use of the communal rag towel. Even in the midst of hardship, laughter is currency. Bragging rights over a spectacular escape from a peeler, the glory of a rigged dice win, or the fame of being the best rat namer on the block. These are the rewards that keep you going. For a few hours, hunger and cold fade into the background, replaced by the noise and comfort of camaraderie. So you invent, you gamble, you laugh, and above all, you share the stories that make your life, for a moment, feel bigger than the rookery itself. Because in Victorian London, entertainment isn't just a distraction, it's a lifeline, a rebellion. And the only real magic you've got, healthcare, is what you get from the gang's self-appointed doctor. Usually a 13-year-old with a stolen bottle of gin and a suspiciously sticky rag. If you can still walk after, you're considered cured. In the rookery, injuries and illnesses aren't if, they're when. Every scrape, scratch, cough, and mystery rash is as much a part of daily life as stale bread and dodging peelers. There's no clinic, no nurse, and definitely no kindly physician making house calls, unless you count old Ma Barker, whose cure-all is just last week's potato water, now extra fermented for flavor. So, when someone in the gang gets hurt, it's up to the local medical expert, a position that usually goes to whoever's had the most colds or can keep a straight face while saying, "This won't hurt a bit." The doctor's toolkit, a cracked mug of gin, a handful of crumpled bandages, an old sock for a sling, and a rag that, legend has it, once started out white. If you're really lucky, there's a rusty pair of scissors borrowed from the tailor down the lane. Surgical precision is less important than speed and a willingness to ignore complaints. Colds and coughs are treated with a variety of potions, none of which taste better than they smell. You might get a spoonful of honey if someone's managed to swipe it. But more often it's street syrup, a blend of boiled onion skins, stale beer, and, if available, a dash of gin to numb both throat and memory. The dose is always as much as you can keep down. If you're not better by morning, you get another spoonful, this time with a warning to stop faking and get back to work. Cuts and scrapes are frequent and sometimes dramatic. The doctor douses everything in gin because, in the absence of real antiseptics, what else can you do? Stings. But it's better than losing an arm. For bigger wounds, you get wrapped up in whatever cloth is cleanest, or, at least likely to infect you twice. If it looks serious, you get a rousing speech about bravery and then, if you're very unlucky, a visit to old Ma Barker for her infamous root mash. No one knows what's in it, but it smells like regret and tastes like misery. Toothaches are another rite of passage. The standard remedy: chew on a cold stone, rinse with gin, and hope the tooth decides to fall out sooner rather than later. There's always some brave soul who volunteers to pull it for you, armed with pliers, a steady hand, and the reassurance, hold still, it'll only hurt a lot. You learn quickly to avoid those volunteers if possible. Rashes, fevers, and other afflictions are solved with a mixture of herbal lore and total improvisation. Some swear by dock leaves, others recommend coal dust, and there's a growing market for Mrs. Fitz's magic ointment, which is mostly lard and wishful thinking. The important thing is to keep moving and not complain too loudly. Drawing attention means a visit from the parish nurse, who is rumoured to carry both a bucket of leeches and a notebook for names. In the absence of real medicine, laughter is sometimes the best cure. The gang gathers around, sharing stories of the worst cut I ever had, or the time I coughed up something that looked like a shoe. Survival is a group activity, and even the sickest get to join in on the joke once they stop coughing, that is. By sunset, if you can stand, you're fit for duty. If you can't, someone drags you to the warmest spot by the wall and promises to check on you, usually by poking you with a stick. And so, bruised, battered, but never beaten, you learn to heal the only way you know how, with a stubborn spirit, a dash of gin, and the hope that tomorrow you'll be just well enough to run faster than whatever's chasing you. Rain means scrambling for dry spots, under wagons, in abandoned warehouses, or in the dubious comfort of a leaky sewer. The smell is legendary, the companionship even more so. Victorian London is a city in constant negotiation with water. The clouds gather, the wind picks up, and before you know it, rain is hammering the rooftops, turning cobblestones into slippery slides, and alleys into rivers. For a street gang, the weather isn't just an inconvenience, it's a tactical problem. Your mission: stay dry, or at least less wet than the average loaf of bread. There's no shortage of clever hiding places, but none of them come with guarantees. Under the wagons is a classic move. The mud might be ankle deep, and the proximity to actual horse feet less than ideal. But the heavy wooden wheels and canvas covers offer at least a temporary reprieve from the downpour. Everyone squeezes together, knees tucked, rainwater dripping down from the wagon's edges and pooling in little lakes around your boots. Every so often, a horse shakes off the wet and sends another mini tidal wave through your hiding spot. Still, it's better than standing in the open, getting washed toward the Thames. Abandoned warehouses are the next best thing, assuming you can find one that isn't already occupied by a rival gang or a nest of irritable cats. The trick is to get in before everyone else. Windows are usually broken, which is convenient for entry but less helpful for actually keeping the rain out. Once inside, you fight over the driest corners, stack old crates for makeshift benches, and hang wet scarves on rusty nails. There's an art to claiming space. The early birds get the best spots, while the latecomers hover near the doors, dodging the steady trickle of water through every crack in the roof. And then, for the truly desperate, there's the sewer. It sounds worse than it is. Actually, no. It's exactly as bad as it sounds. The sewers are dank, dark, and filled with every possible smell you wish you'd never learned to identify. Still, a dry patch of bricks in the tunnel is sometimes preferable to spending the day soaked to the skin and shivering. The bravest, or most unfortunate, in the gang light a stolen candle, tell ghost stories about sewer monsters, and pretend the scratching noises are just rats and not something worse. The upside? No one bothers you down here. The downside? You might never get the stench out of your clothes. On rainy days, the city changes. Everyone is forced into closer quarters, friend, rival, and even the odd friendly dog. Kids who might have spent the day avoiding each other end up swapping stories, sharing the last dry heel of bread, or collaborating on new shelter strategies. Card games break out in the shadows. Someone pulls out a battered harmonica. The mood, surprisingly, lifts. There's a comfort in shared misery. Everyone wet, everyone cold, everyone laughing at the way the world seems determined to keep you humble. Of course, the rain also brings opportunity. Shopkeepers are distracted. The peelers prefer to stay dry, and crowds are thinned by anyone with sense or a roof. It's the perfect time for a quick snatch and run, or to rescue a loaf that's been left too close to the edge of a stall. If you're especially lucky, you might find a new spot, a forgotten shed, a friendly stable hand with room in the hayloft, or even the rare treat of a kitchen door left ajar by someone in a hurry. By nightfall, as the rain slows and puddles mirror the lamplight, you emerge wrinkled and weary, but still standing. You may not have stayed completely dry, but you stayed together, and that's what counts in the rookery. Besides, nothing makes the first patch of sunlight feel quite as glorious as a whole day spent running from the rain. Every gang has a boss, usually someone who's survived long enough to grow a beard and lose most of their teeth. The boss makes the rules, keeps the peace, and always takes the biggest cut. You spot them before you ever join the crew. That mysterious figure parked on a box at the back of the alley. Eyes sharp, boots battered, a cap pulled down low over a weathered brow. If you're really lucky, your boss has a proper nickname: Skipper, Fagin, or just the old one. Sometimes it's something more specific, like Three Finger Ned or Ma Peg, but the vibe is always the same. Authority with a limp and a look that says, "I've seen more winters than you've had hot dinners." The boss isn't just the oldest or the strongest, though a certain brawn does help. It's about cunning. The old one remembers which baker can be trusted for a handout and which is likely to chase you down the street waving a rolling pin. They know every shortcut, every safe house, and every copper's favorite pub. It's said they can sense trouble before it appears, probably because trouble has been their dance partner for years. The rules? Simple, but not up for debate. No stealing from your own. No lying to the boss. Always, always share your haul. Because in this world, cooperation keeps you fed, and selfishness gets you booted, sometimes literally. If you're caught breaking the code, you'll find yourself sent on the worst jobs: chimney duty, rubbish patrol, or, the lowest of the low, scraping barnacles off canal boats for a penny a bucket. The old one might have a soft spot for the underdog, but not for fools. Every operation starts with a plan from the boss. They map out the day's targets, assign jobs, and make sure the youngest kids have backup. If the haul is good, they take their cut, always the largest, but never all. You grumble, but you know the truth. Without their how, you'd be cold, hungry, or locked up faster than you can say handcuffs. The boss is also the final word on disputes. Fights over bread, boots, or who gets the driest corner to sleep in are settled with a single look, a pointed cough, or, in extreme cases, a very long story about how things used to be back in my day. Despite their authority, the old one looks out for the gang in ways that aren't always obvious. When someone's sick, the boss is the one who finds the scrap of old blanket or bribes a market lady for a little broth. When the peelers are closing in, it's the boss who disappears first, so everyone else has time to scatter. If a new member joins, they're tested, not with hazing, but with careful observation. The boss can spot a liar, a grass, or a troublemaker with a glance. It's a skill earned the hard way. Some say the boss was once a legend, a pickpocket so fast no one ever saw their hand move, or a runaway from a wealthy family, hiding from a life of lace curtains and manners. Most likely, they're just someone who survived. In a world where luck runs thin and loyalty is currency, living long enough to go grey is a kind of miracle. And so, the gang listens, follows, and, when it comes time to divide the spoils, accepts the boss's share with a grumble and a wink. There's no pension plan for the boss, no cushy retirement. When their time comes, someone else steps up, maybe the next oldest, maybe the boldest, maybe the one with a knack for dodging disaster. The rookery rolls on. The rules stay the same. And the story of the old one becomes another tale told around stolen bread at the end of a long day. In a city that chews up the careless, the gang's boss is the glue that keeps everyone together. And as you pull your scarf tighter and count your share, you can't help but hope you'll last long enough to earn a name of your own. As night falls, the city transforms. Gas lamps flicker, shadows deepen, and the gang gets to work, quiet, coordinated, and slightly terrified of what might be lurking in the fog besides other gangs. The sun drops behind the rooftops, and the world turns from grey to shadowy black. Victorian London at night is a different animal. All soft edges and looming threats, wrapped in a shroud of mist that crawls along the gutters and creeps between your boots. The market stalls close up, shutters bang, and the honest folk bolt their doors. For the street gangs, though, this is the real start of the day. Night is when the city's secrets come alive, and when the best opportunities and the greatest dangers slink out from the alleys. Gas lamps throw hazy pools of yellow light onto the cobblestones, but they don't do much to keep the dark at bay. Their glow is friendly if you're standing under it, and mysterious if you're watching from the shadows. For the gang, those pools of light are both guideposts and warning signs. Venture too close, and you risk being seen by the peelers on patrol, but stay in the darkness too long, and you might walk straight into a rival, or, worse, something unexplainable rustling in the fog. Patrols start with a roll call, a head count whispered in the dark, to make sure no one's already been nabbed by the law or wandered off after a pie cart. Everyone pairs up, no one goes alone, not at night, not in a city with more ghosts than gaslights. Each pair gets their route. One along the river, where the fog is thickest, one by the market square, empty and echoing with the day's lost shouts, another by the big houses, where windows glow with candlelight and rumors of fat purses float through the air. Walking at night is a lesson in careful confidence. You move quietly, boots muffled by layers of grime and whatever rags you've wrapped around them. Every sound is amplified, the clack of your heel, the distant echo of a carriage, the soft hiss of a lamp being lit or snuffed. Even the street lamps themselves seem to be watching. You learn to listen for the telltale signs, the scrape of a copper's baton, the slurred singing of a tipsy baker, or the sharp whistle that means run, now, and don't look back. The darkness is both friend and foe. It hides you from the peelers, makes your mischief easier, lets you blend in with the scenery. But it also hides other things. Rival gangs on the hunt for a soft target, stray dogs with sharper teeth and sense, and the city's legion of superstitions. There are stories, whispered over cold porridge, of spectral figures on the rooftops, of the lamplighter's ghost who'll grab you by the ankle if you step into his patch of shadow. No one claims to believe them, but no one lingers in the dark, either. For the gang, nighttime patrols are as much about routine as opportunity. You're looking for chances, a dropped purse, a dozing vendor, an open kitchen window letting out the scent of stew. but you're also watching each other's backs. There's a quiet pride in moving as a team, everyone knowing their job, every signal understood. When the job is done, you melt back into the rookery, hearts racing, faces flushed from cold and excitement. Before sleep, you gather in a darkened stairwell or beneath the bridge, recounting the night's near misses and small victories. The city is quieter now, the gas lamps flicker low, and the last patrols of the night drift home to whatever patch of dry ground they can find. In the end, you survive the darkness together, outsmarting the city for one more night. Because for a Victorian street gang, the shadows might be home, but it's the flicker of light and the warmth of your crew beside you that keeps you going until dawn. Occasionally, the gang targets the upper crust. It's less Ocean's 11, more try not to sneeze on the fancy lady while untying her purse. If you get away, you're a hero. If not, you're grounded. By which I mean arrested. Every now and then, ambition gets the better of caution. The rumours sweep through the rookery like wildfire. Lady Muckleworth is in town, shopping for gloves. The mayor's wife has a new hat with enough fruit on it to solve the vitamin deficiency of the entire street. Some duke is riding through the market square in a carriage stuffed with mysterious boxes. Boxes that almost certainly do not contain food, but might contain something shiny. Suddenly, the usual targets, drunk dock workers and distracted bakers, seem dull. The gang sets its sights higher. There's a strategy, of course. You don't just stroll up to the rich and start emptying their pockets. First comes recon. One of the smaller, more innocent-looking kids scouts the scene, trailing behind the lady with the velvet bag or the lord with the heavy gold chain, blending into the swirl of servants and hangers-on. They return breathless, cheeks red from the effort of not being noticed, and whisper details to the rest. Purse on the left. Dog on a string. She dropped her handkerchief twice, so she's clumsy. Assignments are handed out with all the gravity of a royal heist, but the reality is far more chaotic. One kid distracts the lady's maid by asking for directions in the thickest rookery accent they can muster. Bonus points if they throw in a cough for sympathy. Another slides through the crowd, eyes on the prize, palms sweaty with nerves and the lingering scent of last night's garlic stew. There's always the risk of the dog. Usually something tiny and vindictive with a bark that could wake the dead and a bite that could leave you limping for days. The moment of action is a blur. You edge close, pretending to admire the shine of a brooch or the way the fancy people's boots never seem to have holes. If you're lucky, a commotion starts, a cart tips over, a pie vendor drops their tray, someone starts arguing about the price of goose fat. That's your chance. In a perfect world, the purse slips free, passed hand to hand, and disappears before the lady even notices her hand is suddenly lighter. But the upper class are unpredictable. Sometimes, the fancy lady isn't as clueless as she looks. Sometimes, a butler grabs your wrist with the reflexes of a seasoned boxer. The mayor's wife shrieks, a peeler appears, and suddenly you're the star of a chase scene you never auditioned for. Your heart hammers as you zigzag through a maze of horses and hats, the whole time hoping you don't sneeze, trip, or get recognized as that one with the suspiciously empty pockets. If you get away, you're the stuff of legend. The spoils are divided. Tails grow taller, and for a week you're known as Silk Fingers or Duke Dodger. You even earn first pick at the next breakfast, which, depending on the week, might be a larger-than-average slice of turnip or the coveted end bit of a stale roll. If you're caught, the story goes very differently. The crew scatters, your name is hissed in warning, and you spend a few hours, or, with bad luck, a night, in the local police station, being told by someone with magnificent sideburns that you almost had promise. Targeting the rich is risky, but for every failed attempt, there's the thrill of the hunt, the feeling that, for a moment, you played the same game as the gentry, even if you did it in shoes with holes and a cap borrowed from 3 different owners. And when the adrenaline fades, you slip back into the crowd, just another smudge in the city's grand painting, already plotting the next unlikely score. Because in Victorian London, even a glimpse of the upper crust is enough to fuel stories, dreams, and, if you're lucky, a slightly less hungry morning. You're always weighing your options: stick with the gang, strike out alone, or try your luck with the mysterious benefactor who promises work in exchange for your eternal soul, or at least your shoes. Life in the rookery means choices, none of them particularly good. Each morning you wake up in your borrowed bed or dryish corner and wonder what sort of day it's going to be. Will you stick with the crew, scrape by on scraps and cleverness, or gamble on something, or someone new? For orphans, the question is even trickier. With no family and no official protector, every day is a careful balance between freedom and survival, loyalty and opportunity, hunger and hope. Staying with the gang means predictability, of a sort. You know the routine, the rules, and the unwritten code. You have friends, or at least allies, who'll warn you when the peelers are on the prowl or when a rival crew is eyeing your patch of the bridge. Meals are shared, laughs are frequent, and stories are swapped under leaking roofs. But there's little chance of moving up in the world, and every day is a new round of scrapping, scrambling, and just barely getting by. Then there are the Fagins, not just the infamous one, but dozens of shadowy adults with nicknames like Uncle Charlie or Mrs. Tuppence. They hang around the edges of the rookery, offering promises as shiny as the rings on their fingers. A hot meal, a clean shirt, honest work, they'll say, eyes twinkling with the kind of sincerity that only comes from decades of outwitting street kids. Sometimes the offers are legitimate, at least for a while. Maybe you end up sweeping a shop for a shilling, or running errands for someone who only occasionally asks you to look the other way. But more often than not, the deal is crooked. You trade your independence for a few warm nights and a lot of rules. You might join a family of sorts, a new gang run with adult efficiency, where loyalty is rewarded with leftovers and betrayal with a swift kick to the curb, or worse. The work can range from picking pockets to hawking wares, to the more mysterious tasks that no one talks about until it's too late. Some Fagins are kind enough, feeding their charges and offering a little protection. Others are tyrants, demanding obedience and giving little in return. There's always the temptation to strike out alone, to become the lone wolf, romantic in theory, miserable in practice. You picture yourself as the clever urchin hero, dodging danger and thriving by your wits. The reality is cold nights, long stretches without a proper meal, and nobody to watch your back when things go wrong. For a day or two you might manage, scavenging extra hard, sleeping with one eye open and both hands in your pockets. But sooner or later, the streets get lonely, and you realize that even a rough gang or a questionable benefactor is better than the silence and the hunger. It's never an easy choice. The gang might rib you for even considering the Fagin option. There are endless jokes about selling your shoes for soup and trading freedom for boiled cabbage. But deep down, everyone understands. Everyone has that moment where a warm fire and a slice of bread look like the best things in the world, even if they come with strings attached. For most, the answer is a bit of everything. You float between gangs and benefactors, take what luck offers, and try not to burn bridges you might need to cross again. You learn to read people quickly, who's genuine, who's a danger, and who's just another orphan trying to climb out of the gutter. And through it all, you hang on to the one thing that matters most. The hope that tomorrow might be easier, that the right gang or the right break will come along, and that you'll find a way to survive, shoes and soul intact. In Victorian London, that hope is often all you have, and, on the roughest nights, it's enough. Sometimes the gang gets caught, and it's off to the workhouse. Escape plans are drawn up in chalk, communicated via secret knocks, and executed with varying levels of success and mud. Getting caught isn't just a bad day, it's a rite of passage, a warning, and the reason you never take a shortcut past the big iron gates of the parish workhouse. The workhouse looms over the rookery like a dark cloud, its walls high, its windows narrow, and its doors always creaking ominously. Inside, it's all stone corridors, echoing with the sound of too many boots and not enough laughter. You're handed a scratchy uniform, a bowl of greyish stew, and a bed as soft as last week's turnip. There's little talking, even less smiling, and the constant threat of chores, scrubbing, sweeping, sorting, and, if you're really unlucky, picking oakum until your fingers feel like they've been chewed by rats. But if the workhouse is good at anything, it's creating escape artists. The moment you arrive, your mind starts plotting. No one actually wants to stay. Not with rules about silence, meals at the mercy of someone else's ladle, and sleep enforced with the enthusiasm of a prison guard. The older kids share tales of legendary breakouts, each story bigger than the last. There's talk of the great laundry cart getaway and the chimney shuffle of 46. Tales that always end with muddy boots, a ripped shirt, and, if the storyteller's feeling generous, a loaf of bread swiped from the kitchen. Escape planning is a team effort. Every mark on the wall, every loose floorboard, every creak in the stairs is mapped and memorized. Plans are drawn with stolen chalk, sometimes on a patch of hidden brick, sometimes on the back of someone's hand. Secret knocks are agreed upon, each one more complicated than the last, until you start to worry that someone will forget and accidentally signal all clear when what you really need is run for your life. Timing is everything. You watch the guards, memorize their routes, and listen for the bell that signals lights out. Some nights, you fake a stomachache just to get a peek at the corridor layout. Other nights, you volunteer for potato duty, hoping to steal a spoon, not for digging, but for unscrewing the window latches in the boys' dormitory. The best escape attempts happen during storms, when the rain drowns out footsteps and the mud outside covers a multitude of sins and faces. Getting out is rarely elegant. Sometimes it's a mad scramble through the laundry, hiding under bedsheets until you can slip past the dozing night watchman. Sometimes it's a dash across the yard, breath held, hoping no one sees the trail of muddy footprints you leave behind. If you're caught mid-flight, you plead innocence or fake confusion, depending on whether the supervisor is new or just tired. On the lucky nights, you make it to the rookery by dawn, dripping wet but grinning, with a tale to tell and a slightly bruised sense of pride. Of course, escape isn't just about freedom. It's about proving you're still smarter than the system, still quick enough to outfox the adults. The workhouse is meant to break you, grind down your spirit, teach you obedience, and remind you just how little power you have. But for every new rule, there's a loophole. For every locked door, there's a loose window. For every stern warning, there's a gang of street kids ready to laugh it off and draw up their next plan in the mud outside the gate. Some kids end up back inside, eventually. Others graduate to never getting caught in the first place, learning to dodge the peelers with a sixth sense for trouble. But everyone carries the memory of that one escape, the night you outran the rules, mud in your hair and hope in your heart. And in Victorian London, that's sometimes the only kind of victory that matters. The night winds down with rumours. The haunted bridge, the copper who can smell lies, the legend of the chimney sweep who never came back. Whether you believe or not, you listen. It passes the time. After a day spent dodging peelers and searching for scraps, there's a certain comfort in huddling together with the gang, telling stories that make the darkness feel more like company than a threat. In the rookery, belief isn't so much a matter of faith as it is entertainment. Superstition fills the cracks left by hunger and cold, something to hold on to when the world feels a little too sharp around the edges. Rumors are the city's currency. You trade them for favors, for secrets, for the privilege of knowing something before everyone else does. Maybe it's news that Mrs. Grumble lost her wedding ring down the drain, and now she's cursing everyone who passes her door. Maybe it's a whisper that the butcher's dog has gone missing, and will return only if you tie a red rag to the lamppost outside the pie shop. Sometimes the rumors are about the boss, who's rumored to have once outsmarted a judge with nothing but a wink and a stick of licorice, or about a rival gang who supposedly scored a treasure trove of apples, though no one's actually seen it. But it's the ghost stories that draw everyone in close. They start as whispers, grow into full-fledged tales, and before long, everyone is peering at the shadows with wide eyes and half smiles. There's the story of the haunted bridge, where a street kid once vanished, leaving behind only a single boot and a trail of muddy footprints that never quite dry up. Or the tale of the candleman, who roams the rooftops on foggy nights, lighting lanterns and leaving pennies for those brave enough to stay awake and spot him. Some say he's a ghost. Others say he's just an old lamplighter who got lost one night and never came back down. Then there are the superstitions, which everyone claims to laugh at but secretly obeys. Never step over a crack in the rookery after sundown, or your luck will turn. Don't whistle in the stairwell, or you'll invite the stairwell spirit, supposedly a kid who tripped carrying a pot of stew and now haunts anyone who dares to make a sound. If you find a button in the street, you must spit on it before picking it up. And never, ever say the peeler's names 3 times in a row, or they'll appear just as you're about to get away with something. Every gang member has their own favorite tale. Some swear they've seen the copper's nose, a legendary policeman who can sniff out a lie from half a mile away and whose mustache is said to twitch at the scent of mischief. Others talk of the chimney sweep's revenge, a shadowy figure who appears to any kid too bold to sneak onto rooftops alone. If you see a single black feather in your path, that's a warning. Don't climb tonight. The best storytellers keep everyone guessing, mixing fact with fiction, real close calls with exaggerated horrors, making even the bravest laugh and shudder in equal measure. As the stories pile up, the rookery's hardships feel lighter. For a little while, hunger and cold are replaced by gasps, giggles, and the thrill of maybe, just maybe, being in the company of something supernatural. Eventually, yawns outnumber stories, and the gang settles in for the night, each member secretly turning over the night's rumors and ghost stories in their mind. Maybe you don't really believe in haunted bridges, or chimney sweeps who never came back, or peelers with supernatural noses, but you keep an eye out anyway, because in Victorian London, a little superstition is just good sense. After all, who's to say what's true and what isn't? In a city where every shadow might hide a secret and every night is full of stories, you listen just in case. It passes the time, and sometimes it's even enough to keep the darkness at bay. Before sleep, the gang gathers for a final huddle. Jokes are swapped, dreams are whispered, some want a real bed, some want breakfast, and some just want to see the next sunrise without losing a sock. In the cold blue shadows of the rookery, night draws everyone together. Whether you're sleeping in a borrowed blanket under a leaky bridge or wedged between 2 friends in a drafty stairwell, the city has quieted, at least a bit, the last of the street shouts and wagon wheels fading away, and the only things left are the smell of damp stone, the steady breathing of tired children, and the comfort of each other's company. For a brief spell, before the aches of the day fade into sleep, there's space for the impossible. Hope. The youngest are the first to start wishing out loud. "Someday, I'll have a bed with a pillow softer than a turnip," declares one, to a chorus of snickers and a flurry of very specific follow-up questions. What if it's a parsnip? Or a beet? Or 3 turnips stacked together with a potato for your head? The jokes go around, each one more ridiculous than the last, until everyone is giggling so much they almost forget the scratchy blankets and the sound of rain dripping somewhere inconvenient. Older kids, a little more world-weary, keep their hopes closer to the vest, but even they can't help sharing when the mood is right. Maybe it's a whispered plan for escaping to America, where the streets are rumored to be paved with gold and possibly lined with even softer turnips. Maybe it's just a wish for breakfast tomorrow, a real breakfast, with sausages that aren't suspiciously cold and apples that don't need inspecting for bite marks. One declares, in a voice both hopeful and resigned, "I just want my socks to match, just once in my life." This is met with much nodding and a friendly sock theft threat from the next pillow over. The best dreams, though, are collective, a shared fantasy of a world where the gang can stick together, warm and safe, with full bellies, and no need to run from peelers or hide from the rain. The wish isn't just for a softer bed, but for a bit of peace and a chance to laugh without looking over your shoulder. Some want to be famous. Pickpockets turned stage actors. Orphans turned inventors. The first kid from the rookery to own a pair of shiny boots without having to borrow them first. Others just want a day when they don't have to be clever to survive. Of course, no gang huddle is complete without a round of outlandish jokes and what would you do if questions. If you could eat anything right now, what would it be? If you could be anywhere in London, where? Someone inevitably answers in a pie shop after closing, and someone else claims a sleep in Buckingham Palace, just to see what the Queen dreams about. There's a contest to see who can describe the most ridiculous future. Beds made of feathers, endless pudding, owning a shop that only sells left shoes, for maximum profit from all the mismatched orphans. But under the jokes, the hopes are real, fragile things, bright points of possibility in the dark. They might not believe deep down that all their dreams will come true, but they believe in each other, in the laughter, in the nightly ritual of wishing together for something more. As eyelids grow heavy, the jokes trail off and the wishes become quieter, turning to murmurs and sighs. Tomorrow will come soon enough, another day of running, scraping, and surviving in the shadows of Victorian London. But for now, the gang lets hope have the last word. And as you drift off, you hold tight to your wishes, ridiculous and ordinary alike. Because in a world where socks go missing, sausages are mysterious, and every night brings a new story. A good wish is worth more than gold. It's the one thing nobody can pinch, and the one thing you never have to share unless you want to. Once a month, whether you need it or not, it's laundry day. The gang's cleaning technique involves dunking shirts in a muddy basin, scrubbing them against a brick, and hanging them up to dry in the soot-choked air. You're never quite sure if your shirt comes out cleaner or just differently stained. If you're lucky, the rain helps. If not, you wear the same outfit until it's stiff enough to walk on its own. Laundry day in the rookery isn't exactly a festival of freshness. For most kids, it's an unavoidable ordeal, one that starts with a chorus of groans as the boss announces that even the pigeons are starting to complain about the smell. There's no laundry soap, of course. If you're feeling especially posh, you might have a crumb of lye soap traded from a generous neighbor, but more often, you're relying on elbow grease and the abrasive power of last week's brick. Preparation begins with a scavenger hunt for all the clothes you haven't lost, traded, or burned in the last chimney incident. Shirts, socks, and trousers are peeled off, sometimes with considerable effort, revealing a patchwork of skin impressions from seams and, occasionally, an entirely new colony of insect squatters. You try not to think about it. In the communal spirit, the youngest are usually put in charge of finding water, which means hauling sloshing buckets from the nearest pump or puddle, all while dodging the local goose with anger management issues. The washing itself is a group activity, more muddy rugby match than domestic chore. You line up along a cracked basin or a handy stretch of gutter, dunking garments and scrubbing them until your hands turn pink or blue, depending on the water temperature and your proximity to the canal. A shirt is deemed done when the biggest clumps of mud come off and the color underneath is at least slightly more visible. Stains become old friends. That mysterious splotch on your left sleeve might be gravy, might be blood, might be yesterday's adventure. No one's judging. Once the scrubbing's done, it's time for the world's most unglamorous fashion show. Wet shirts and socks are hung on every available line, fence, or stolen bit of string. The air fills with the scent of wet wool, coal smoke, and crushed dreams. If you're lucky, the sun peeks out long enough to crisp your shirt before nightfall. If you're not, you're left with a damp bundle that will remain slightly soggy until next month's attempt. Scheming is an important part of laundry day too. While your clothes dry, you're plotting ways to keep them from getting borrowed by the neighboring gang or from the bolder local wildlife. Everyone knows the story of the kid who lost an entire outfit to a particularly ambitious rat, only to spot the creature strutting around a week later in one sock and a waistcoat. For many, the day isn't just about scrubbing dirt, but about reclaiming a small sense of pride. There's something satisfying about seeing a sort of clean shirt flutter in the breeze, proof that you've conquered at least one battle against the grime. There's even laughter as everyone compares the new stains to the old, making bets about what color they'll turn by next week. Someone always claims to have invented the rookery tie-dye, a blend of soot, mud, and faded memory. By evening, everyone is back in their slightly less filthy clothes, shivering a bit, but feeling fresh enough to almost pretend you're respectable. The discomfort fades, replaced by a sense of camaraderie, of having survived another ordeal together. After all, in a world where comfort is rare, even cold, damp, and questionably clean is a victory. And so you head back to your corner, wrap yourself in your laundered rags, and tell yourself you might do it all again in a month, unless the weather, the goose, or your own stubbornness says otherwise. In the rookery, that's what passes for good hygiene and an even better story. Dental hygiene is a cruel joke, and toothaches are handled by whichever gang member claims to know what a molar is. Remedies include chewing on old rope, numbing the pain with stolen gin, or letting Big Bill have a go at it with rusty pliers. You quickly learn to eat your bread on the good side, and never, ever trust a boy named Needles with your mouth. Nobody in the rookery has heard of a toothbrush, let alone a dentist. The closest thing you've got to oral care is the hope that whatever's stuck between your teeth will eventually work its own way out, either by dissolving or by being replaced by a new splinter of bread crust. Toothaches are just another rite of passage. At first, it's a dull throb, easily ignored while running from peelers or plotting the next bread heist. But over time, it turns into a constant companion, pulsing, nagging, and reminding you with every bite that you probably shouldn't have eaten that questionable sausage from the alley market. The initial home remedies are passed down from older, slightly less toothed members of the gang. Some swear by chewing on a bit of rope or cloth, something to massage the gum or confuse the pain. Others recommend biting down on a cold stone, holding it in your mouth as long as you can bear, hoping the ache numbs before your face freezes off. Stolen gin is the ultimate cure-all. Good for numbing the pain, sterilizing wounds, and, if you're lucky, making you forget you have teeth at all. Of course, nothing ever truly works. When the pain becomes unbearable, desperate measures are called for. That's when Big Bill enters the picture. Less a dentist, more a local legend in the art of extractions. Bill claims to have learned his craft from an actual barber surgeon, who, it's rumored, once cut off his own thumb just to prove a point. Bill's tools are simple: a pair of pliers pilfered from a blacksmith, a steady hand, and the ability to tell distracting stories while prying at your molars. If you're lucky, the extraction is swift. If you're not, you'll have a new respect for medieval torture and a sudden craving for soup. Preparation for a procedure involves a group of friends gathered around for moral support, or, more accurately, to place bets on whether the tooth or your courage will give out first. There's always someone cracking jokes. Keep that tooth. You can trade it to old Ma Barker for her next miracle tonic. Meanwhile, Needles, the gang's other self-appointed dentist, notorious for his shaky hands and over-enthusiastic use of sharp sticks, hovers nearby, offering unsolicited advice and reminders that he's just as good as Bill, honest. You take one look at his collection of broken toothpicks and decline. Post-extraction care is, in a word, primitive. You rinse with whatever's available: cold water, a bit of gin, or even soup if someone's feeling generous. There's no ice, no painkillers, just a rag to bite down on and the satisfaction of surviving yet another Victorian trial. Missing teeth are badges of honor. A lopsided grin is just proof you're tougher than a loaf of last week's bread. Plus, fewer teeth mean fewer places for future pain to settle in. If, somehow, you manage to keep your full set, you become an object of envy and occasional suspicion. Oi, he must be hiding them somewhere. For everyone else, toothaches are simply the cost of doing business on the streets. You adapt by learning to chew with the opposite side, soaking your bread in stew, and laughing at the way your whistle gets a little higher with every lost incisor. By the time you finally drift off to sleep, sore-mouthed and possibly a little tipsy from the anesthetic, you swear you'll avoid hard food forever, at least until breakfast, when the only thing on offer is last week's biscuit. Welcome to Victorian dentistry. Painful, unreliable, and, if nothing else, a guaranteed conversation starter. Getting nicked by the peelers isn't just a risk. It's practically a badge of honor. The first arrest is a nerve-wracking ordeal, full of clanging cell doors, suspicious gruel, and a stern lecture from someone with truly magnificent sideburns. If you make it out in one piece, and without your shoes swapped for a potato, you've officially graduated from rookie to seasoned rascal. It starts, as most disasters do, with a bit of overconfidence. Maybe you tried to swipe a purse just a little too boldly, or your distraction routine didn't distract quite enough, or maybe the stars just weren't aligned that day. Suddenly, a bobby's got you by the scruff, and you're swept up in a wave of blue wool, gleaming buttons, and a whiff of pipe smoke. There's a pause as everyone, your crew, the market vendors, half the neighborhood, stops to stare. You do your best to look innocent, but your face is already famous, and the crime is all but signed with your name. The trip to the station is humiliating in a distinctly Victorian way. No one's rough, exactly, but the copper's grip is firm, and his muttering about rascals these days leaves you no doubt that this isn't his first parade of pickpockets. The station house is both less and more terrifying than you expect. Bare floors, high windows, and that particular smell of old boots and vinegar. You're lined up and catalogued, height, name, real or invented, and the item you allegedly liberated from its previous owner. The cell is a masterpiece of unfriendliness. Iron bars, a stone bench, and just enough straw on the floor to make you itch in places you'd rather not. You share the space with a revolving cast of characters, some just as green as you, others old hands who offer sage advice like, "Don't eat the gruel and never sleep with your boots off." Time crawls. Someone snores. Someone else quietly practices the art of looking pitiful for when the magistrate comes by. Meal service arrives, if you can call it that. A tin of suspiciously grey gruel, perhaps meant as a lesson in humility, or possibly an experiment in new building materials. You force down a spoonful, decide hunger isn't so bad, and pass the tin to your cellmate, who accepts it with a grimace and a shrug. There's a rumor that a particularly cunning lad once used the gruel to patch a hole in his shoe, but no one knows if he ever made it out. The magistrate's visit is the highlight of the day, for a certain value of highlight. He appears in a cloud of legal papers and dignity, and his sideburns could have their own postcode. The lecture is long, the words complicated, and the message simple: behave, or you'll find yourself breaking rocks until you can spell remorse. If you look properly chastised, you might get off with a warning or a few hours of sweeping the street. If not, you're in for a longer stay and more gruel. Escape isn't really an option. Too many locks, too many eyes, and not nearly enough hiding places. The best you can do is survive with your pride and your shoes intact. Some kids trade stories, others trade socks, and everyone keeps an ear out for a friendly face coming to bail them out. When release finally comes, it's with a mix of relief and secret pride. You've joined the ranks of those who got caught and lived to tell the tale. Back in the rookery, you're greeted as a minor celebrity. The older kids slap you on the back and demand every detail. The younger ones look at you with awe, equal parts, admiration, and terror. You spin the tale as heroically as possible, embellishing the lecture and omitting any moments of actual fear. From now on, you're not just another urchin, you're a veteran of the Victorian justice system, ready to try your luck again, with just a bit more caution and, hopefully, no more encounters with legendary sideburns. So tonight, as you sink into your freshly washed sheets, maybe take a quiet moment to remember those long-ago London nights, when a warm place to sleep meant wedging yourself between two friends on a pile of rags, and breakfast was whatever you could run faster than. Life in a Victorian street gang was loud, cold, hungry, and rarely fair. But it was also a lesson in stubborn hope and the kind of friendship you only find when everything else is falling apart. Think of those gang kids. Scrappy, resourceful, and always a little bit grimy. Outsmarting peelers, laughing over crusts of bread, and dreaming up escape plans that probably involved more mud than success. They survived a world that made very few promises and kept even fewer, finding humor and comfort in the small victories. A dry night, a shared joke, the rescue of a lost boot, or just making it to sunrise with most of their teeth intact. It's easy to look back and wonder how anyone endured a life like that. But the answer, as always, is that humans are relentless, hopeful, and absolutely ridiculous when it counts. Street gangs weren't just thieves and troublemakers, they were family, each one as flawed and loyal as the next, writing their own stories in the margins of a city that barely noticed they existed. So tonight, let's be quietly grateful for warm beds, full stomachs, and the privilege of falling asleep to history's chaos rather than waking up in the middle of it. May your dreams be soft, your pillows free of lice, and your imaginary boots always come in matching pairs, because history may be messy and unfair, but it's also a reminder, if they could get through all that, you can probably handle your Monday morning. Good night, sleep well, and may you wake up far from the cobblestones, unless you like the sound of chimney sweeps and carriage wheels. In that case, sweet dreams of London fog.